Sri Gurubhyo Namaha children. You are welcome for the online platform Ekalaiva. Children, we have seen how our grandmother of Khushwant Singh was and how he was imagining in the part 1, and we will be continuing the same in the part 2. So he was not able to accept that his grandmother was once young and she was having an husband. Because he had seen right from his childhood, he had seen only the old aged grandma and he never saw his grandfather, and they were young at that time, he was not there. So even his father and mother also wouldn't been there when grandmother was young before marriage. So it was not accepted. It was very hard for him when somebody said, okay, let us see what he was feeling. Was hard to believe. What was hard to believe? That his grandmother had a husband and she was young. So this was very hard. Why? Because he had seen his grandfather in the portrait. My grandfather's portrait hung above the mantelpiece in the drawing room. He wore a big turban. The drawing room. So the mantelpiece was there. You know what is a mantelpiece? A small shelf. And on the top a portrait, a photo was kept. You know that anybody is dead, their photo will be hung and it will be just given flower garland is put to it. So grandfather was like that, hung, portrait hung above, portrait is a photo. Portrait hung above the mantelpiece in the drawing room. He wore a big turban, so he was wearing a big turban on his head. You know that he was a Singh. You know, a Singh was their custom is to wear a turban. So he was wearing a big turban. He was just wearing a loose fitting cloth. You know that sippa they'll be wearing, a loose garment he was wearing. His long white beard covered the best part of his chest. So he is an aged person, and two things for them. One is their hair they are not cut and their beard they are not shaved. So he was having a very big beard and it was covering all his chest. So it is grey in color, it is white hair. So he was having a white hair beard, covered the best part of his chest, and he looked at least 100 years old. So in the photo, when somebody is looking the portrait, they'll think that he was 100 years old. He did not look the sort of person who would have a wife or a children. So the photo tells him, because right from his birth, Khushwant Singh would have seen his grandparent in the photo, and that too the aged photo, not the young one. So its mind is not accepting that once he was a young, it was not able to accept him. And what he was just telling is, he was telling that he was of 100 years old and he was not having wife and children. He was looking as if he is having only hundreds and hundreds grandchildren. Okay, at least 100 years old. He did not look the sort of person who would have a wife or children. He looked as if he could only have lots and lots of grandchildren. So the photo tells it is 100 years old, and in that 100 years old, he felt that he was having only grandchildren, not the children and his wife. So here he feels that. So as for my grandmother, being young and pretty, the thought was almost revolting. She often told us of the games she used to play as a child. That seemed quite absurd and undignified on her part, and we treated it like the fables of the prophets she used to tell us. You know that some prophets will be telling of fables. For example, any Bible story or any story if you are taking, so they will be saying that there was Eliza or a prophet Isaiah, so many are there, Isaiah is there, and they will be saying some stories. So this all happened. The Moses was born, Abraham was born, he was 100 years old, he didn't get a child. It all will be looking like a fable to you. The same way, Khushwant Singh also feels the same. What he feels is, when grandmother used to tell that, in young age I used to play, so immediately Khushwant Singh will think that it is all a prophetic fable said by the prophets. it won't be a reality for him. Because right from his young age, he's seen only the old aged lady, not the young age. So immediately he will be getting a mind when the young age, when grandmother used to say that I used to play in my young age, what he will be thinking is, he will be thinking that, see, in his old age, how should it be? So it is all a fable story. It is a prophetic fable story told. So like that you will be imagining. So children, it is very clear to you till this? Okay. She had always been short and fat and slightly bent. Her face was a crisscross of wrinkles running from everywhere to everywhere. No, we were certain she had always been as we had known her. Old, so terribly old that she could not have grown older and had stayed at the same age for 20 years. She could never have been pretty, but she was always beautiful. She hobbled about the house in a spotless white with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop and the other telling the beads of a rosary. Her silver locks were scattered untidily over her pale, puckered face, and her lips constantly moved in an inaudible up in the morning and get me ready for school. So till it's clear, he had seen only the old aged lady and she had always been short and fat. She was short and fat and slightly bent. She was tall only because of her old age. She was slightly bent because she is short. So short and fat and slightly bent. See the description he gives about his grandmother. So he says that she has always been short and fat and slightly bent. Short, fat, slightly bent. Okay. Her face was crisscross. What do you mean by crisscross, children? So the wrinkle moving here and there, because of that there will be a crisscrosses on the face and everywhere in her body. So there will be a crisscross on her face and all over the body. So because of old age, wrinkles running from everywhere to everywhere. So the shrunken skin was having wrinkles and it is running from here to there, everywhere to everywhere in her body, and her face was just having wrinkles. No, we were certain she had always been as we had known her. So here, no, we were certain she had always been as we had known her. So here she was seen her and she was the same for 20 years, the old, so terribly old. So old when starting 20 years before she was old and now terribly old that she could not have grown older. More than this older she couldn't grow and had stayed at the same age for 20 years because the author seen her for 20 years and all the 20 years she was like that. She could never have been pretty. So she was not pretty, but she was always beautiful. So he loves his grandmother. So he says that she's not pretty, young, but she was beautiful in her old age. Okay. She hobbled about the house in the spotless white with one hand resting on her waist to balance a stoop and the other telling the beads of a rosary. So she was slightly bent and she was just hobble, have a stick on one ear and the other hand will be with the rosary beads and she will be just hobble all over the place and just walking here and there and always rotating the rosary with beads and telling prayer every day. Locks were scattered, her silver locks were scattered. So here her silver hair was just scattered everywhere. It was curly hair and it was scattered everywhere. It is uncontrollable to tied. So it will be scattered and untidily over her pale. So over a pale, puckered face. So she was very aged and the chubby face became a puckered one because of the age and she was like that. And her lips constantly moved inaudible Inaudible, children, inaudible. Audible is the root word, in is prefix, and here inaudible is prefix. Okay. So it was inaudible to others. She was telling very silently the prayer with the rosary. Up in the morning and get me ready for school. And as a young old lady, it is a responsibility to dress up her grandson. She will be getting ready for him to the school. She said her morning prayer in a monotonous sing-song while she bathed and dressed me in the hope that I would listen and get to know it by heart. I listened because I loved a voice but never bothered to learn it. So here the author knows very well what he was thinking is his grandmother was reciting the prayer little loudly so that his grandson, her grandson will be just learning along with her. So here he knows the point what the grandmother means, but he had not repeated it, he had not by-hearted it. The reason the grandmother want to say the poem because he want to made by heart by his grandson, and it will be useful in his future. So she was telling loudly, and this was knowing very clearly to the grandson. He listened because he loved his voice, but he never by-hearted it. He loved his grandmother. The beautiful in his age, a person says means you can understand the love between the grandmother and the narrator. In a aged beautiful, he is saying she is not pretty but beautiful in his age. So here he says that means the love for the grandmother is such that he is accepting that she is a beautiful woman. The same way he knows what purpose the grandmother sings the prayer, but he is not ready to accept it. So here what he is doing, when he is getting ready, he was just making a prayer little louder so that our grandson will be learning by God and it will be useful for him in the future. The grandson understand very clearly, but he listened to the music prayer because the voice of grandmother is so nice and he want to learn. That I would listen and get to know it by heart. I listened because I loved her voice. He loved her voice, so he accepted, but never bothered to learn it. So he never bothered to learn it by heart. Then she could fetch my wooden slate which she had already washed and plastered with yellow chalk. So she will be taking a slate, black color slate. In olden days they will be using slates with chalk and slate they will be writing. So she just made the slate and a chalk ready for the school, washed and plastered with yellow chalk. A tiny earthen ink pot, so she was having a tiny earthen ink pot and a red pen. Tie them all in a bundle and hand it to me. So she will be having a slate, your ink pot with red ink and a pen and your chalk. So then all in a bundle, she will be just bundling all and hand it to me. So she will be just handing over to the author while he was going to school. After a breakfast of a thick stale chapati with a little butter and sugar spread on it. So daily what is breakfast will be? He will be having a breakfast, he will be having a thick stale chapati. So he will be having a thick stale chapati with a little butter. So she will be applying a little butter on it and sugar spread on it. On the top sugar will be spread on it. We went to school. So they both, grandmother and the grandson together, they will be going to school. She carried several stale chapatis with her for the village dogs. So both morning daily what is her duty? She will be making ready the grandson Kushwant Singh and she will be singing a prayer song so that he will be by-gotting. He will be listening but he will never by-got it. And they will be having a slate, chalk and a pot, ink pot and a red pen and they will be bundling together, and a stale chapati will be bundled, and that will be given to the dogs nearby the school. So both grandmother and the grandson will walk out of the house to the school. So till this it is very clear, children, you understood. Shall we move to the next paragraph? Okay. Lips constantly moved in audible prayer. Yes, she was beautiful. She was like the winter landscape in the mountains, an expanse of pure white serenity, breathing peace and contentment. My grandmother and I were good friends. My parents left me. Okay. So here what happened? Grandmother was appearing with the white dress, and she was always looked like an expanse, like a mountain, white mountain. So serenity, breathing peace and contentment. She was very happy and contentment and peaceful. My grandmother and I were good friends. My parents left me with her when they went to live in city, and we were constantly together. She used to wake me. So what happened? When the parents of Khushwant Singh want to go for a town, they have to go and find a nice place. Till then, the son was left in the grandmother's place, and she was taking to the school daily. And she will wake him, and she will make ready him, and they both will go with the stale chapati to the as the years rolled by, we saw less. Okay, sorry. Okay, my grandmother always went to school with me because, so they both went to school. Why? What is the reason? The reason is the school is attached with the temple, and the temple priest will be teaching the children there, and they will be seated in the veranda of the temple, and they will be just having a school lesson, and inside the temple she will be reading a scripture. So both will be going. So we will see that. My grandmother always went to school with me because the school was attached to the temple. The priest taught us the alphabets in the morning prayer, while the children sat in rows on either side of the veranda singing the alphabet or the prayer in the chorus. My grandmother sat inside reading the scriptures. When we had both friends, we would walk back together. This time the village dogs would meet us at the temple door. They followed us to our home, growling and fighting with each other for the chapatis we threw them. So the temple was very near, and the grandmother and the grandson started moving together, having the things, slate and the chalk and the ink pen and the ink pot, a mud ink pot, and they will be just bundling. The other bundle of the state chapati taken by grandmother, they both will go and they will attend there. So grandmother will read scripture in the temple, and in the temple veranda, the children will be learning lesson, the priest will be teaching, and after finishing these lessons, they will be throwing chapatis while they are going home, and till the home, the dogs will be following, growling and barking and fighting along the dogs, and they are reaching their grandma's house. So this was happening every day till the mother find a house in the city. So this was happening. So we will keep a full stop here and continue in the next class, children. Thank you. We will see you in the next part.